So welcome back to Liverpool and the Speedy Expo 2022. The theme of the day has very been much about sustainability and forward thinking, and I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Amelia Woodley. Now you're responsible for sort of the ESG agenda with Speedy, and Matt Sexton, you're from Futerra.
Yeah, correct.
It's exciting stuff that you're both working on, but Matt, first of all, explain to me sort of what you're doing up here and what it is you're really here to talk about.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, Speedy are a client of ours. We've been working with you guys for a couple of years, I think, and we as a business are concerned with making a better world. And everybody knows that the problems that we have. We have forests ablaze and ice caps melting and species dying off and all. So we face a real challenge. And what we're working with for Speedy on is developing their sustainability strategy. Because actually, if you look at the industry that they're in, the sort of people they deal with and they themselves, they're going to build the world that we're going to live in for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And we're kind of at a tipping point now. If we get things right now, then we can set ourselves on the right path. So we've been working with Speedy to develop their strategy on carbon and waste and water and all of these things. But they, probably ahead of most of our clients, are really now thinking about the long term. And are really looking at the century ahead and going, well, what are the big questions, what are the big challenges we have to answer, and how do we as a business play a part in that? I think it's probably fair to say.
Because carbon emissions of buildings and heating buildings and lighting buildings make up a significant proportion of global carbon emissions, many of which isn't fully understood by people. So we can start making, as you say, a proper difference, not just with new buildings, but can we also do it retrospectively?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, when people think about carbon emissions, they typically think of cars and planes and tailpipes. And, the reality is if you look at the stuff that the built environment is made out of, steel, concrete, all of these things, they have a massive carbon footprint. And I can never remember what the statistic is, but China's sort of poured more concrete in the last decade than the rest of humanity has in the preceding 100 years. So there's this huge carbon footprint associated with the materials that go into our buildings. Then, of course, you've got all of the energy that they actually use. So yes, of course we have to get rid of disposable cups. Of course we have to drive EVs. But the big stuff, the infrastructure and the buildings that we deal with, that is a mountain of carbon and a mountain of impact that needs to be dealt with. And of course, Speedy and their clients are right at the heart of that. So if these guys start, sort of doing things differently, and the whole construction industry starts doing things differently, then we stand a chance of turning things around. So it's a really big sector, and people don't tend to think about it because we don't really encounter it in our daily lives. But it's huge.
And Amelia, you've been about a year, is that right, with Speedy?
Yeah, about that.
And before you, there was nobody really doing your role. So this was how challenging was it, just coming in and starting from scratch?
It was a really interesting challenge, actually. So Speedy made the commitment that they wanted somebody dedicated for the role because it's not just part of someone else's job. So I came in and joined forces with Futerra to say, right, we want to get out an ESG strategy, we want it to have meaning, we want it to have purpose, and we want people to understand it. And Futerra's skill in that world is about how to make strategies with a difference and engage people. So we've spent the last year designing our strategy called The Decade to Deliver, and it's about creating a hire revolution. So as Matt said, hire is actually very sustainable. We've got a lot of contribution to make to the construction industry. So we've set out a really ambitious strategy around accelerating innovation so we can drive down carbon, leaning into the climate change discussion, but also looking at things around our people agenda and also our community work as well. So whilst it's been a big role and a challenging role, it's actually been really exciting because we've kind of been able to reset and rethink and say, okay, let's do something that's steeped in purpose, that is the core to our business, because we know that our customers will believe in us, we know that our investors will want to invest in us, but most importantly, our people want to work for purpose-led organisations as well that have that strong ESG value behind it.
And presumably, I suppose the biggest jewel in the crown for you at the moment, I'm guessing, is this new technology centre in Milton Keynes, because that your ESG rating there is A+. that's a clear example of what you're actually trying to achieve and aim for.
Absolutely. Milton Keynes is a phenomenal achievement. You know, it's not a big fancy building in the centre of London that's been designed from the inside out. It's a working location, it's a working depot. And we've been able to work with our partners global and say, how do we make this more efficient from an energy perspective? How can we use renewables so we're more self-sufficient? And as you said, it achieved an EPC-A rating, which is such a massive achievement. But with Milton Keynes, it's been able to enable us to showcase our innovation to our customers, but also it's a nicer place for our people to work. So they've got wellbeing gardens, they've got a comfortable environment that's heated and cooled the right way. And we did a little study at Milton Keynes. We asked them, you know, psychologically, how did they feel pre and post that building? And everyone said they felt more valued, more engaged, more connected to their colleagues. So we're using Milton Keynes as a blueprint to then look at what can we do around the rest of the estate, because it's absolutely possible to design and build a zero emission facility for Speedy.
So Matt, what can companies learn? What can they do? What can they try and achieve? And how do you engage with them, I suppose, is also the big question.
Oh no, I think it's a very good question. I mean, I think, you know, the first thing to say is we absolutely need business to do this. I mean, government can set up the right tax regimes, can do everything else, but ultimately, you know, businesses dictate what happens. So I think they can do a number of things. The first thing they can do is they can commit. And I think that, you know, there's a blueprint which has been laid down. There's a thing called the Sustainable Development Goals, which is 17 targets through to 2030. I would take a look at those and see how you can contribute to it. The other thing you can do is commit on climate change. So, you know, fundamentally, I think there's sort of three things you have to remember about climate change. We need to get a 1.5 degree global warming outcome. In order to do that, we need to get net zero emissions by 2050, which means you probably have to halve your emissions by 2030. So you remember those three things, you know, net zero by 2050, halve your emissions by 2030, and we get a 1.5 degree outcome. The other thing you can do is innovate. And just looking around the hall here today, I mean, you know, you've probably seen it as well. Just every other stand, you know, has got some form of sustainable innovation. You know, there are pieces of equipment with solar panels. Everything is being electrified now. You've got sustainable fuels, and I think where business really does well is innovating. And you know, whether we like Tesla and Elon or not, they created a tipping point. You know, when that car came out, progress accelerated. So I think that yes, business needs to make firm commitments, but I think more than anything, bring its capacity for innovation to bear, because if you get these products that work economically, deliver a great environmental outcome and are easy to use, then you create a tipping point. And I think that's what today is all about.
Do you see enough?
Do I see enough? I saw more than I was expecting. I mean, you know, I haven't been to a big show like this for a long time. So to see, to see electric mini diggers and things like that was really amazing. So, I mean, my short answer is there isn't enough at the moment. You know, we've got to halve emissions in the next decade, and we're currently nowhere near where we need to be on that. But I am seeing encouraging signs, and you know, it is. I think the technologies can't come fast enough. So my short answer is there needs to be much more, but this is a hell of an impressive start.
And then the other thing is about engagement. I mean, obviously, companies like Speedy making these sort of very bold, very forward-thinking commitments is one thing. How do you think people need to engage, and how do you think you can encourage people to engage, given your example? So, Amelia, we'll start with you.
So it's an interesting one. Absolutely, as Matt said, you know, this is a great start, but we need to get people on board so that it's kind of business as usual. And one of the things about engagement is about creating the art of the possibility for them. So I think with sustainability, sometimes it's been kind of a bit doom and gloom. It's been a world that we want to run away from. It's very difficult. How are we going to do it? We've got tough economic times ahead of us. And one of the things that Futerra has brought out, which we're working with them on, is the awesome Anthropocene goals. So this is kind of the next evolution of the UN SDGs. And they're more hopeful. They're more about how can we create a better world, how can we play a role in that, and giving people a little bit of hope and a bit of sort of framework around, let's create something positive and let's use sustainability as that. We've taken on board Futerra's AAGs, and we've actually used them to start to have discussions with our supply chain. So, things like decent income for all. So we ask them, do you pay living wage? Net zero, what's your carbon target? And it's a way to have a conversation, but a hopeful conversation.
And Matt, you mentioned the target for 2030, but what happens after that?
That's a really good question. I mean, so the Sustainable Development Goals, which I'd advise anybody to get familiar with, but they top out in 2030, and they, they're a blueprint to a better world, but not necessarily the world that we want. We want a world of abundant clean energy, we want a world of clean air, we want a world of social justice, we want a world where everybody earns a decent income. So the awesome Anthropocene goals, I should explain our company mission is to make the Anthropocene awesome, and everybody goes, what's an Anthropocene? Well, we're now...
You took the words right out of my
Well,
mouth.
we're now, we humans, we're now kind of, a geological age. This is the planet is now shaped by us. And I think, Amelia used words like hope and belief. The reality is, people do need hope and belief. And so what the Awesome Anthropocene goals are about is saying, or what the idea of the Awesome Anthropocene is, this era of sort of human-shaped world does not have to be awful. We can still get the world we want. And the Awesome Anthropocene goals, we're not formally proposing them yet, as a successor to the SDGs, but it's interesting, a lot of people are picking up on it, is what is the sort of world that you want? So and they're designed to stretch thinking. We have got, a decent universal income for everybody. We've got everybody should enjoy 100 years of health, saying there's no reason why most people can't, or everybody can't live to 100 and can't live well there. So we're saying, if you look towards 2050, what is the sort of world that you want to see? And people find that motivating, I think, because and if they can then ask themselves, how do I contribute to this? How would I contribute to everybody on Earth getting 100 years of good health? Then you start to think about, how can I innovate? What products could I bring to market? How could I contribute? So I think hope and belief, and the Awesome Anthropocene goals. Not everybody will like them, but the idea of them is to stretch thinking. We've come up with the phrase "consumption is regenerative," which I think is going to sort of excite people and raise hackles in equal measure. But ultimately, it's saying, well, if we can make all the materials we use, in the process of making them, have them draw carbon out of the atmosphere, have them strengthen biodiversity, wouldn't that be amazing if everything you bought actually made things better rather than worse?
Yeah. Well, absolutely, it certainly does stretch thinking. Well, listen, amazing to talk to you both. I'd love to have a crystal ball and just see how many of the sort of programs and ideas that you're talking about actually come to fruition. But hopefully, it will be all of them. And keep up the good work.
Thank
Amelia,
you.
thank you
Thank you very
much.
much indeed.